Hi, and welcome to the ArtSplash podcast, where we will have open and playful and also meaningful and thought-provoking conversations about art, creativity, life, and spirituality that will stimulate both your mind and soul and give you a chuckle at the same time. Hi, I'm Joy Fahey.
And I'm Eve Marie Whitsun-Jones.
And welcome to our second podcast. It's great that you're here. But just before we start today, I'd like to ask you a favor, if that's okay. If you would like to subscribe to our channel, that would be fantastic. It will really help us because we're a new podcast, and obviously we want lots of people to listen who are interested in art. And plus, it will give us the opportunity a little bit later down the line to invite guests to come on our podcast. So that would be fantastic. Thank you. And today we're going to talk about creativity.
There's a big subject behind that, a big topic. Yeah.
So, let's dive in because I think it's such an interesting thing to talk about, and something that's normally sort of just, it's not delved into. You know, people will just say, oh, well, I'm not creative, and it's flippant. And I think it would be really interesting to have a look at what it really means and how we use it in our everyday life, not just necessarily in painting or the arts or whatever, but with everything.
Well, exactly.
So,
and don't you think it's a very subjective expression as well? Because what it means to you and what it means to me may not be the same, and so on. So everybody has their own definition.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And I think, you know, when you really start thinking about it and how it kind of works within us, it throws up many interesting ideas and thoughts and curiosity. I think curiosity to it is quite a good word.
Yeah.
Because how come it is that some days things just really flow, and you know you're on it and something takes over, and then other days it's nowhere to be found. So I think that's really fascinating, and how you overcome it, and especially, you know, when, say, for example, for me, I've got a project to do, so I've got to be on it, whether I'm on it or not, if you know what I mean. So how do you summons it up? What do you do to get it back into the zone? So that's kind of interesting.
Yes, I don't remember. Yeah, it's a good question. Can you force yourself to be creative on demand?
Well, I think there are certain things that you can do to help yourself relax, because I certainly don't think you can be creative when you're tense and stressed. You have to kind of lead yourself into it in a different space, which I would say most of the time I can do that. Sometimes I can't, but mostly. So for me, I will do that by starting anything. Doesn't matter what it might be, whether I'm just drawing or even just tidying up the studio. Taking the dog for a walk, just to change my back chat of stuff that is interfering. And then, of course, you know, I talk a lot about, in nearly all of my courses, about free drawing, about just, even if it's scribble, just to begin on something. And I think that's really, for me, that's really helpful. That starts something. If I can get started, then I'm off and away. But it's kind of interesting because listening to different people and researching, you know, what other people are talking about when it comes to creativity. I listened to a fabulous TED talk by someone called Tim Harford, and he was talking about creativity and multitasking in slow motion.
Oh, in slow motion.
And how creativity kind of develops. And he was looking at it from a scientific point of view. It was very, very interesting. He was talking about two people. One was a choreographer called Twilo Tharp.
Oh yeah, Twilo Tharp, yes.
Yeah, who very well known in the States.
Yeah.
And how many things she did creatively, from dancing to producing to writing books to lots and lots of interesting things, and how she managed to keep on top of it, because you can get so distracted. You know, you have a thought which is really great, you forget to write it down, and then you know, half an hour later or the following day you think, I had that really good idea, what was it?
Yeah.
And you can't for the life of you think of what it is. And how she went about doing that by immediately she had an idea, she'd write it down, and whether it was to do with her writing or her dancing or her this or that or the other, she would have different files and different boxes that she'd put it in.
Yeah.
So once she'd written it down, she could put it in, and then she knew that she'd got it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that actually, when I think about that in relationship to my own creativity, I have piles of different things that I've done, whether it's on sketchbooks, drawings, or paintings, or just doodles, or, you know, whatever. And I write ideas down as I go with it. And I do put those in different files. And I have to say, whilst I've been doing this, getting this new course together, I've been going through a lot of those files, which have really inspired me.
Oh, that's great.
Oh God, I'd forgotten I'd done that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's really nice. I really like that. I'm going to do something with that. So it kind of does work.
Yeah.
And then he was talking about someone, Charles Darwin. I mean, who you don't think in your brain Charles Darwin creativity, do you? Doesn't normally go together.
Yeah.
But he was probably the most prolific creative person ever been, really, for how many things he was involved with, and how he managed through all his time. And this is how this guy Tom Harford came up with the multitasking in slow motion, was that you sow a seed and you start developing it, and then you might get stuck, and then you go on, do something else.
Yeah.
And in the doing something else, it enlightens you to your first task, so you can go back to it.
Yeah.
So he had all these different things going on, from geology, zoology, psychology, botany. He had a whole thing about worms, which he did for 37 years.
Oh my God.
But everyone fed off each one, his
yeah.
ideas and his thoughts and research. But he was being continuously creative with how he was thinking and you know, verbalizing all these different things. From a scientific point of view, I'd never really thought about creativity in that way before.
Did he explain how it happens in the brain? Did he talk about that? Because
not
there's
really,
scientific basis
unfortunately.
For that.
No, he didn't. But that might be interesting to have a look at. So between those two things, I was thinking how interesting, because, you know, I think we were talking last time, we were, about, you know, people wanting to be able to immediately be successful at something. I think you related it to golf.
Yes.
And, you know, if you can't sort of hit the ball first time or get a hole in one, you give up.
Yeah.
And really, I think the essence of all of this was that it's, you know, you sow the seed and you have to slowly water it, and slowly but surely it starts to grow.
Yeah. Well, this is exactly how the brain works. In fact, you know, the neuroscientists are understanding better and better that in order to learn something, it's an iterative process, and it's not something that you can just do in a linear fashion either necessarily. You know, you've got, as you say,
Exactly.
stick with it, then kind of push it aside and let it go. And as you're not concentrating on it, your subconscious is still working on it. Like, do you ever look for something and you can't find it? And then the next morning you wake up and you know exactly where it is.
Where it is, yeah. Well, your brain is sort of processing in the background.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's the value of, you know, having the idea, writing it down or doing something with it, so you've got it there, and then letting it go.
Right. Yeah.
And then seeing where it takes you.
Yeah. I've started using my phone because, I mean, I might be out walking the dogs or in the garden and I'll have a sudden idea for something. And of course, I don't have a piece of paper or a pen or anything. So I start recording a note to myself, you know, a voice memo or something, because that allows me, even if I never go back to it, the act of doing it, I think
exactly
imprints it on in your brain, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure, absolutely, for sure.
Yeah.
And you know, I think also there's another sort of perception, particularly in relationships, painting, that, you know, you ought to be able to start and finish a painting.
Yeah.
Bish, bash, bosh.
Yeah.
And I don't think any painting has done that for me.
Right.
I mean, it will always take me a few days, always, and sometimes a few weeks, and sometimes a few months.
Or even a few years.
And I have to kind of sit and look at it.
Yeah.
And when I look at the pile of stuff that I've got, you know, years.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, you know, it's I think one has got to really embrace the idea of letting it grow.
That it's a process. Yes.
And that it's a process. Exactly.
Yeah. And I think that this is a really important aspect of it, is that it's not something that you do necessarily to get an end result. You know, the point of doing it is, I think, as we even said the last time, it's the doing it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And forget about perfection, whatever perfection is.
Exactly.
So those two things were really interesting. And then I was having a look at something by, what's her name, Brené Brown. Fantastic woman. And she has done an interesting book on To Unlock Your Creativity.
Oh.
And she had some very interesting things to say about it. And she said the main thing is you have to have courage to allow the creativity to begin. I think my observation is that the tendency is to get so wound up with the not good enough idea. I don't know where to start. I don't know what I'm doing. This is wrong. This is childish. Blah. Get so not always, but can get so in the way that it prevents you from doing anything.
Right. Exactly.
And you kind of have to have the courage to dive in. Again, going back to what we said before, to start something.
Yeah.
Have to get the wheel moving.
It's interesting, isn't it? The idea of courage. I mean, what is it that you're being courageous about? Like,
this was the thing.
Yeah.
You have to have the courage not to be perfect.
Okay. Right. Well, it's the fear of imperfection. Yes,
exactly. Whatever perfection is, but I think we're so trained as children to results orientated. You know, from the word go, where you're having to work towards exams in order to get a top, you know, a grade in order for us to move on.
Yeah.
So it never gives us any space in our brain to explore. Right. Because we've got to work towards this goal of passing. And whatever it is.
No, you've got to start something and you've got to finish it as well.
Yeah. And then you're graded on it. So you're judged on it.
Yeah.
So it kind of kills the natural creativity. And How sad is that? It's awful.
It happens, I think, well, probably to you as well, is that you might have, as you were saying, you've got all these things that you started and you've put them aside. And maybe there's a thought in your head or an intention that one day you will finish it. But you have this compulsion that you have to finish it, don't you? You feel like I can't leave it the way it is. I've got to do something.
Yeah, yes and no. There are some things that I think I would like to finish out. There are some things that I say to myself, I'd like to explore it further. I'd like to see what else I could do with it.
Okay.
Which is a much better option than saying I'd like to finish it.
True.
What would happen if I do X, Y, and Z on it and trial it out and see all that kind of stuff? If it then lands up ditto being finished, then great. But if it doesn't, it just means then I'll do something else to it. So I think there's also, when I'm thinking about it and talking about it now, there's a big difference between then what you're painting. You know, if you're painting an abstract and it's a serious abstract, is there an end to it? You could keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it, couldn't you? Whereas if I'm doing a portrait, it's going to be a completely different scenario. If I'm doing a landscape, it's a different scenario. So I think, you know, one has to distinguish between those two things. In the abstract situation, it's who's to say when it's finished?
Right. Yeah. There is a quote from someone who talks about that. Like, it's finished when you feel like, you know, you're as happy with it as you need to be, or something, you know, some vague thing like that. Yeah.
And then you can also then move into the other zone. You're doing a portrait or still life or whatever, you know, you might do that in an abstracted way, in a minimalistic way, if you like. So you lead the viewer to fill in the gaps,
right?
Which I find very interesting to look at when I'm looking at different people's work.
And don't you think that even when you're doing a portrait or a landscape, which is, you know, it has a subject and it has you know, an endpoint, you might say, a recognizable endpoint, you could keep fiddling with it, couldn't you? You could just continue adding more detail and leave the overall thing intact.
Yeah, you could do.
Yeah.
You'd probably overwork it if you did.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yes.
You know, in many respects, less is more. But as far as being creative is concerned, you see there, when you're looking at any of those things, you've got creativity and skill. So you've got to kind of put those. I was thinking about this morning. In many respects, you have to do the two things. You learn the skill, then you have to kind of let that go, because you have the skill embedded in you.
Yeah.
Let that go and then see what happens creatively.
Okay.
Develop something.
Skill. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you know how to apply the paint. You know the consistency. You know the color mixes. You know how color values work. You know how design works and composition. Because that you've instilled that. Yeah. And now you have to kind of let it go.
Yeah, it's almost like you learn the rules and then you learn how to break them later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can relate that to so many things. You look at music, for example, you know, we have wonderful classical music. And then as we've progressed, somebody has to learn how to play the instrument. And then they can start doing lots of interesting other things, and jazz and contemporary and, you know, weird and wonderful noises. You can do all kinds of things with it. The same with dance, you know, as you know, I was in ballet for a very, very long time, but I loved modern jazz. But you need a foundation of knowledge, of skill, to be able then to break out of it.
Yeah, right. Sorry, did you want to say more about the TED Talk from Brene Brown? I think I...
Oh, yeah, okay. So she was talking about the courage to be imperfect. And in doing that, you find like a connection, and the connection is as a result of being authentic, because people can resonate with authenticity. If it's kind of not real, if it's superficial, you don't get the same relationship or the same connection.
With what?
You don't get the same feel, anything.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
Well, I'm just talking about what she was talking about when it comes to being creative. If you're painting, so if you're painting and it's all terribly stiff and starchy, not relaxed, not your personality, you're not authentic with it. Say you're copying a photograph,
right,
and you're just copying a photograph, you're not putting your individuality in it,
your essence into it. Yeah,
you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was why she's saying to let go, and then you can be yourself. That's kind of pretty scary.
Yeah, can be.
Because who is that?
Yeah.
And then you're authentic, and then be willing to let go of who you are. So because we have this idea that people should see us in a certain way.
Well, again, yeah, it's the fear of being judged
in
some way.
Yeah,
of course. But I think it's really interesting that I often think that creativity can happen in under sort of constrained circumstances. So the opposite of the letting go and the relaxation. If you are given a certain thing to do in a certain time frame, and you've got certain materials to do it with, kind of like, remember the television show MacGyver? Do you remember that was an American TV show? Well, it's now become sort of like a verb, that when you are stuck in a situation and you've only got a piece of rope and some bubble and some gum and and a bit of wire, how do you make a bomb, kind of thing. So I think so that's called being MacGyver. And so you can pull in with your limited resources and your limited time, you can create something that works or that fulfills the need. So I think creativity can happen in all kinds of different scenarios.
Absolutely, I totally agree. And sometimes when you're under pressure, you have to pull something out of the bag.
That's right, yeah.
Then something gets pulled out of the bag.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to have this done by blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So therefore, I've got to really focus.
And some people work better that way, don't they? They only really
under pressure.
Sort of, they blossom under those pressured circumstances, and that's when they can write, and that's when they can paint or do whatever it is that they're being asked to do.
Yeah.
At the 11th hour, at the 11th, 59th minute, they're quickly
whoa
together.
Aha moment.
Yeah, that's right. So maybe at the end of the day, we can say that I don't feel creative because I'm not X, I'm not relaxed, or I'm not, whatever the right sort of environment is. And that's not, it's fair to say that, but at the same time, I think that we can talk ourselves out of putting, the effort into it, because we don't think the conditions are perfect.
Absolutely, totally. And I think that gets to a lot of people. Oh, I haven't got the right space, or I haven't got this, or I haven't got that, or I haven't got the other, therefore I won't start.
Exactly.
But I don't know whether you saw in the Facebook group, I thought it was lovely, Becky, who left a little message, and she's traveling.
Oh yes, right.
And she said she didn't have time to do any painting, but she's got her little sketchbook, and she says, I'm doing something every single day in my sketchbook.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Whether it's a scribble or whether it's a, you know, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. She says, I'm doing it every day, you know, and she's, you know, on riding a bicycle tour somewhere in Europe, I think.
Right.
You know, she's not got all a sack on the back with all her paints and other brushes and a pad and everything. She's got a little sketchbook and she's just doing little sketches every day.
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah.
So I think when we start giving ourselves excuses why not to, I think we have to kind of take a look at that.
Yeah, I know.
What's the resistance? Why am I not doing it?
Well, that's it, exactly. And, you know, having that moment of sort of self-reflection allows you to pinpoint what it really is that's stopping you. And, you know, maybe it's an excuse because you, again, are letting, you know, past programming get in the way of, oh, I'm not, you know, I'm going to be judged. I'm not going to produce something I like or that other people are going to like, or whatever, you know. I think these things keep coming back, don't they? They're once you face them, they don't always completely go away, you know, these issues.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
They don't.
Yeah.
And I think this judgment thing is really an important thing to address. I was talking in doing this course about being in the studio, and I was showing my sketchbooks, and you know, there were some really ugly paintings. And you know, my observation is it's as difficult to paint an ugly painting as it is to paint a beautiful painting, because the judgment gets in the way.
Yeah.
I can't paint an ugly painting because what will people think? And I can't paint a beautiful painting because I'm thinking I'm painting an ugly painting, but I don't know. But because, you know, do you see what I mean? Yeah. It's kind of all gets into a complete 2 and 6 knot of this crazy voice that's in the back of our mind going, you know, it's not good enough and you can't do this. And what will they say? And what will all that? Yeah. Isn't it mad?
Yeah.
So I think a really good, in fact, we might do this, a really good challenge is to paint a really horrible painting.
I was thinking of that too. I think that's a wonderful challenge.
So yeah, we're always, the tendency is to be in that dichotomy, is to be in the flux of letting go, not judging,
yeah.
not worrying about what you think about it personally and what you think other people will think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. You were saying about, you know, intentionally creating an ugly painting. I think is a wonderful challenge, because actually it kind of frees you up, doesn't it? Because sometimes, you know, there's this angst about, you know, do I put this color or that color, and where do I put it, and what sort of, you know, brush stroke do I use? Whereas if you are intentionally doing something ugly, you can do whatever the hell you like. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you might be absolutely staggered at the amazing results.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, all right. I think that should be a
I mean, that's why, you know, with the things that we were talking about last week, and I'll have to find a new definition for it, the difference between the right and the left side of the brain.
Oh no,
if you if you just switch on the creative side without a care in the world. I mean, children, when they're painting, they don't have a care in the world about whatever it is.
That's true.
They just do it.
Yeah.
So you know, we can just do it, and there are people who just do it fantastically, brilliantly well.
Yeah. And you know, I think like everything, it's a practice, right? The more you know, like Becky doing her sketching every day, and I've been trying to do something every day, whereas before I may not have been doing it as frequently, but I'm sort of pushing myself to do something every day. And I think just that in itself, I mean, it's like doing anything over and over again. You know, the brain actually starts, you know, this is where the neuroscience and the neuroplasticity comes in. You're rewiring or creating new connections. And those new connections are allowing you to make even newer connections. And that's where you end up going down all these amazing different paths that perhaps you wouldn't have started on if you hadn't taken step one. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the other word that comes into my mind, it's a little bit like improvisation. To see what happens. And I remember, very much when I was doing the dancing stuff, we had to improvise a lot. So I think giving yourself a directive of improvising is also quite an interesting way of accessing it.
Right. Yeah. And intentionally doing things that you think, well, it's again sort of related to the ugly painting concept, but even in the color scheme, when you're using your color wheel and you're trying to do complementary colors and then, an accent color or something, break that rule and do, use colors that normally wouldn't look nice together in some way. I don't know,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
How ugly can we get it? Well, you just have really a canvas of mud.
That's true. Yeah. Mud can be fascinating.
But then you could do something with it.
Yeah. I remember when my daughters were little and they were old enough to get themselves dressed to go to school in the morning. And sometimes they'd come out dressed with a really crazy combination of things. And I remember saying to them, I say, you can't wear pink and red together. That just doesn't work. I mean, how silly, of course it works. And if that's what they want to wear, that's the way that they should do it. But in my head, I had this thing, red and pink. No, you don't put those two colors together.
Isn't it mad?
Yeah, very, very mad.
So it's very hard to strip off all the old nonsense in the back of the head.
Yeah.
Just to be free, have the freedom to express yourself. And I suppose, using one of, what's her name? Brene Brown, the woman. Yeah. One of her words is to be vulnerable. To expose your vulnerability. And most people, I think that being vulnerable is being weak. Yeah. And actually, it's really the opposite. Being vulnerable is a sign of strength.
Yeah.
And I do feel that people, again, move towards that because it's authentic. Authenticity, courage, creativity, authenticity, vulnerability, they all seem to be, together connected in one way or another.
Yeah.
And, starting with the courage to allow yourself to get into creative mode.
Yeah.
And then not worry that it's not perfect.
Right. Yeah.
Embrace the imperfection, and therefore you're embracing yourself. And you're vulnerable. Yeah.
Because we are imperfect, aren't we? Just by definition. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think probably we don't want people to not like us or not like what we do. And we're scared of either people judging it as horrible or being indifferent.
Yeah. Yeah. I think actually that's worse, isn't it? The indifference.
Oh, it's horrible.
Yeah.
Indifference is just like, and I have to say, I've come up against that many times where people don't make a comment at all.
Right. Actually, I think indifference is the opposite of love. I don't think hate is the opposite of love. I know it's kind of a different topic, but I think that when you're in a relationship and it's starting to crumble, it's not so much that you start to dislike or even hate that person. It's more that you become indifferent to them. And that's anyway.
Guilty.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, because I was thinking about this too, in the sense that, the word manifestation appears a lot everywhere now, and particularly when it comes to personal development and there's a lot of hype, if you like, around manifesting your what you want in your life and manifesting your destiny. And to me, manifestation is sort of, it's creativity, but in a certain, kind of like with a certain end result in mind, in your life. Or even, you could think of manifesting a painting as if, I mean, it seems to set it kind of it has a connotation of it appearing out of nowhere, which isn't what happens when you're painting, but it is coming out of some sort of nowhere, isn't it? Through you, wherever the source of creativity is coming.
Yeah. I mean, I think obviously it's all kind of interlinked. Can I be in a space where I can allow the manifestation of a beautiful painting to materialize?
There you are. There you are. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, I could get into that state of mind. I could visualize feeling really creative. Or, you might say, okay, who is one of your favorite artists, for example? So first person who comes into my mind is, say, Turner, William Turner.
Right.
So could I allow myself to channel William Turner or Michelangelo or Leonardo or Picasso,
whoever, yeah,
or whoever, Jackson Pollock,
yeah,
lovely contrast. Could I allow that spirit of those people to work through me to create something interesting?
And what if you allowed your own spirit to work through you?
Well, exactly. You see, then you get into, oh my God, can I allow that to happen? That's the scary bit. That's having the courage, isn't it?
Well, if you believe, so there's a sense of belief that goes behind it, right? I mean, first of all, the concept of manifestation implies that you have a belief that that you can create, that something can manifest in your life based on what you're asking for, So you're having a belief, and it might be a belief in something, bigger than you, God or whatever you want to call it. And then the creativity is having the belief that you can channel, as you were saying, some inner inspiration, wherever that comes from. So again, to me, it comes back to having a sort of a faith in there being something more than what you see in the mirror. And, well, obviously, that part of ourselves that's not the body, essentially, right? It's not our body.
Yeah, and then we jump. I mean, it's so interesting because you sort of jump into so many other realms, don't you? Because where does the creativity come from? If we don't believe that there's a kind of a higher part of ourselves or higher spirit or whatever, if it's all just analytical and linear and we've completely cut off from our creativity, then we've got ourselves in a mess. So actually, and that's why it was so interesting listening to that thing about with that guy of creativity in science, because in the sciences, you've got to prove it. Now, how the hell do you prove creativity? It's kind of contradictory, isn't it? It's a contradictory statement. And the fact that Darwin, of all people, was one of the most creative people, and yet he was one of the greatest scientists.
Well, I don't think that the two are mutually exclusive.
Dialectic in a way.
Well, I mean, I think all scientists, the really brilliant ones, are extremely creative. I mean, look at Einstein.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So that argument or that premise of science not being creative is absolutely ludicrous. Because in fact, you have to probably be more creative as a scientist than you do even as an artist.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah.
So where does the creativity come from?
Yeah.
there's the interesting things, our imagination. I mean, if I looked at the definition of creativity, the use of imagination or original ideas to create something, or being inventive, having or sharing the ability to make new things or thought of new ideas. So where does it come from?
Well, I mean, if you look at the Bible, I mean, again, you know, it goes back to me anyway, it all goes back to spirituality, and, you know, whatever form that it means to you, you know, could be a religion, could be just a general sort of sense of there's something more than what I, you know, that's out there, beyond me. And I think that, you know, I mean, for people who are atheist, you know, who don't believe, I think it's kind of an interesting question, you know, do they believe in creativity, or do they think of themselves as being creative if they don't believe in God and some other thing?
Let's hear what people have to say.
Yeah,
that would be
fascinating. I'd like to
what
know.
do you guys think about creativity? Where do you think it comes from? I mean, it's such a fascinating subject. I mean, just sort of off the top of my head, my feeling is it comes from being who you are, genuinely, not what people.
And who is that?
Well, okay.
Yeah.
God only knows.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a big question, isn't it? You know, we all question ourselves, you know, who am I? Why am I here? What am I doing here?
And where am I going?
And where am I going?
The next question.
Yeah.
And that creeps closer and closer and closer.
Oh, that's a whole discussion. I mean,
that's another discussion. Yeah.
But I'm totally fascinated by that myself. But anyway.
Whilst we're here and alive and kicking, we still need to answer the question of where does creativity come from? I guess if you think about a baby, and a baby just naturally is. Before it's contaminated with all the horrible stuff that we manage to instill in our kids.
Yeah.
They just are. So I think the creativity comes from just being.
Well, that's it. You know, we are human beings as opposed to human doings, or and we are also human creatings, aren't we? Constantly. Yeah.
So let's hear what these guys have to say.
So just to go back to the manifestation question, I pulled down a definition. A manifestation is the public display of emotion or feeling or something theoretical made real. So I think that's interesting when it talks about emotion, a public display of emotion or feeling or something theoretical made real. Manifestations' origins are in religion and spirituality, because if something spiritual becomes real, it is said to be a manifestation. So it is usually used in a kind of a spiritual, religious connotation.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you know, all the many things that people are talking about these days, which is kind of second nature to a lot of people, is, you know, with the law of attraction and how that works, and how you do manifest things into your life, and what happens, how that process works. It's very interesting. I mean, I would say I've had some personally, you know, some amazing things that have happened from manifestations, things that I have kind of put forward in my mind of where I wanted to go. I wish they'd happen more often.
Doesn't always work out the way you want
but it doesn't kind of work that way. But I do feel that how we are, how we feel, and our attitude makes all the difference to how our life moves forward. You know, the more positive we are and and how we think about things has a great effect. You know, if we're thinking negatively all the time, then 9 times out of 10 negative things happen, and vice versa. So
yeah, and I mean,
again, that's another huge big subject which I love.
Yeah,
I love that subject. But I think all of it boils down to our feeling. If we feel we deserve to be who we want to be, and if our outlet is art, particularly in this scenario, to allow yourself to be the artist that you are.
Yes. Yeah.
Learn the skills without question. You need the skills, and then let yourself then create. You don't necessarily need the skills to start creating, but it certainly helps when you're balancing the two things. Really, that's the foundation for my own way of teaching, is to hopefully give the balance of learning the skill and then allowing yourself to use it creatively.
Yeah, I think that probably is one of the things that stops people, is they don't feel like they have the skill, and also that they couldn't learn the skill. And that's, you know, this is another myth that's being busted right now, when all the science is now coming out with, you know, research about neuroplasticity and how the brain works. And, you know, we used to believe that the brain you were born with was the brain that you died with. In other words, there was, you know, when you were a child, you had the capacity to learn, and, you know, and then at some point, as you became older and adult, that capacity lessened and lessened, and your wiring was kind of fixed. That's the way they used to think of the brain. But now they realize that it's not like that at all. You're constantly.
Well, I absolutely vouch for that, because if I look, I'm doing my life in reverse. I'm learning more now than I ever did as a child. And as a child, I was written off anyway because I was dyslexic. And back in those days, it wasn't recognized.
Yeah.
I was always told that I was stupid, and then I was thick. And
oh God,
what I was doing, it was horrific.
Oh no.
So that was very much part of me coming into the arts, because the things that I could do was I could dance and I could paint and those things. So it was recognized differently. But when it came to you know, educational ditto things, you know, English, maths, and
more academic things.
Academic stuff I struggled with massively from a dyslexia, and really, having got over that later in life, now I'm like a sponge for learning. I mean, you know, I'm listening and reading stuff all the time. And I wish I'd done that when I was younger, but I was told that I was too thick to do that.
God, don't you wish you could go back and just shake these
kill
people,
all those teachers who said that?
Really. I know. And it's heartbreaking, because it happens to so many. I'm sure 9 out of 10 people have had some sort of experience like that in their childhood. And they carry it with them all through their lives, just as you did. And some people never get the opportunity to question that. And you know, they just, that's it, that's what they think defines them. And they never break out of that. And you know, one of the things that I really want to do with people is to show them, by doing little exercises, you know, drawing exercises, that we can bust out of that myth or that belief system that you're trapped in, about you can't draw, for example, or you can't be creative. And this is how neuroplasticity works, is that the more you can demonstrate to someone that what they believe is actually not true, again, the brain starts to reprogram and rewire, and wow, all of a sudden, you know, you break free. It's fantastic.
It's fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think the word can't just should be banished, really.
The what? Sorry?
You know, the word can't.
Oh, yeah.
Should be banished.
Yeah.
And I think the older you get, the more interesting it becomes, because then you use that knowledge in a whole different kind of way. You respect it in a different way.
I think what, the language then, and it goes to language, the language that we use, then we speak to ourselves and to others about that demonstrate that we have a limited, a fixed mindset, they call it, as opposed to a growth mindset. That, I can't do this, I can't do that, you can't do this, blah, blah, blah. It really continues to reinforce those limiting beliefs about yourself and what you're capable of doing. But if you start changing your language, they've shown it. I think you may have heard of neuro-linguistic programming.
NLP. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I did an NLP course a long time ago.
Well, there you go. Yeah. And it's true. It's so true. And just by using, like, for example, using the word yet at the end of I can't do this yet. You did that to me the other day, actually. I remember.
I did. I remember. I do remember.
It's true. And I, you know what? I think about that almost every day.
I'm not a millionairess yet.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. And I think it's all these little subtle things that we can do for ourselves that will slowly, it's not like an earth-shattering thing that happens. It's gradual and it's cumulative. How you can change yourself and how you can develop, creative, the concept of that you are creative, and you keep believing it and you keep doing it, and it just goes on and on and on.
Exactly. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've covered a huge amount over this lovely conversation. And
I'm sure we could talk for another hour. Yeah.
Pardon?
I said, I'm sure we could keep going, but no, let's stop. Yeah.
But it would be very interesting to hear people's thoughts about, what they picked up from this conversation.
Absolutely.
And what they think about creativity, and how maybe not how, what would be stopping them from being creative.
Yes.
What are the blocks?
Yeah.
And I think the biggest block probably for a lot of people is not good enough feeling. So a thought to kind of be on a positive is believe you are enough.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with not good enough. It's believe you are enough as you are, because you are.
Yeah.
We all are.
Whatever that is, whatever that is. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Who is the judge there? It's only, social awful nonsense that makes us judge it in the first place.
Right. Yeah.
So I think actually turning it back on ourselves and seeing the beauty of our own beings would be quite an interesting thing to do.
Well, and yeah, very scary for some people. Yes.
Yeah, I think so. So we're back to courage.
Yeah. Yeah.
But actually just stop and think. Just have a look at yourself, look at your hands and your nails and your skin, and it's magic. How come? How is that there? How am I in this body?
Oh, well, yeah.
You start kind of thinking about yourself very differently. Well, about how actually we're all we're all miraculous.
We are. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So we've had a very miraculous conversation.
Well, maybe miracles will happen as a result of this conversation. You never know.
Never know.
I would love to think that, some of what we're talking about really touches people and really inspires them to think about these things for themselves and maybe have certain realizations, and that it does somebody some good and brings them some comfort or something. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's why we're doing it, isn't it?
Well, yes, precisely. Yeah.
We want to well, it certainly gives me a lot of food for thought, just even thinking about what we're going to talk about. But actually, even within the conversation, it starts other things buzzing around of my own limitations and what my own thoughts of being not good enough on X, Y's, and Z. So I do feel that many people will resonate with that and maybe give it a second thought and say, well, you know what, I could think about myself differently.
Yeah.
And however difficult my situation is, I'm still enough.
Yeah.
I'm still okay.
Yeah.
And I'm
be grateful
being.
for what you have, you know.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
To say thank you for what I've got rather than wish for all the things that you haven't got.
Yeah.
It's interesting, just quickly before we go, I was watching another a Netflix thing called Minimalistic Living.
Okay.
And it was fascinating. It was these two guys who'd been in corporate America, and they'd both sort of arrived at a similar thing, that what did they want all this stuff for? They'd earned a lot of money and they'd accumulated, you know, all these gadgets and gizmos and cars and
yeah.
And dawned on them, well, they're not happy.
Yeah.
They were miserable. Why
Right.
were they so miserable when they could have, you know, financially anything that they wanted? So they started down this route of exploration and landed up writing a book.
Cool.
And about living a minimal life.
Yeah.
And they've obviously, you know, Netflix have obviously picked up on it, and they did the story of how it's all happened and the difference that it's made in their lives and how much happier they are. Yeah. Because they live in such a different free space of not being contaminated by you know, having things to make them feel better.
Well, you know, this
because the having things never does make you feel better. No, it's how you feel that makes you feel better. And the catastrophic problems that society has now, particularly with the kids, of the bombardment of advertising, of, you know, wanting, having more. And this horrific perception of magazines and television and films that unless you look like that, or unless you have this, or unless you have that car, or this dress, or that pair of shoes, or that watch, or whatever, you weren't good enough. And that's what they're zoomed in on 24 hours a day. Yeah. And how sad it is. So yeah, I think when you just peel down and get to your heart and soul, and that's brilliant. That's the best bit.
And all you need is a pen and a sketchbook.
And love.
And love, yeah.
All you need is love.
Yeah, all you need
and a pen and a sketchbook. Yeah, exactly. Fantastic.
Okay,
so
Julie,
I think the next time we have our conversation, we'll be talking through from Canada.
Yes, yes. I will be traveling this Sunday and spending 3 weeks there with my other two daughters and my two grandsons and all my other friends.
Fabulous.
A couple of whom are actually very talented artists. So I'm very much looking forward. We're going to have a workshop, I think, somewhere in all that, and we're going to play with jelly plates and all this sort of fun stuff.
Oh, great!
I'm really looking forward to that. Yeah,
fantastic. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Well, I hope you have a lovely week. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you to everybody for listening. Do leave your comments and do all the things that you need to do.
Okay.
Like if you like,
yes,
subscribe if you'd like more. All helps to generate more interest with the site, and it would be really lovely to reach as many people as possible who all want to be creative. So all right, great. Lovely. Okay, thanks, right. Joy. Have a lovely day. Take care. Bye. Yeah, and you too. Bye, everybody. Thank you. Bye. Bye.